And welcome back to another episode of the Double Doink Podcast. My name is Brenden. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We're recapping round one of the NFL draft. Tons of crazy stuff going down. No one else will do it than my man, my friend, Mr. Kevin Negandhi. He is the anchor at SportsCenter on ESPN. He is in Detroit on hand for the NFL draft. Kevin, how we doing?
Brenden, how we doing, man? Good morning to you. The NFL draft's my favorite thing. It's my favorite event. And I thought we were going to have a bunch of surprises early. We didn't. We still had a surprise in the top 10. And then I think there were plenty of other surprises as the draft moved on, the teens and the 20s. And I think we're going to have more surprises, especially in this second round tonight.
14 straight offensive picks, 6 quarterbacks in the top 12. It was a wild night. Just let's get the vibes in Detroit right now. So you're on hand first. How was last night? 275,000 fans. So it is the record for the most fans at an NFL draft. Tell me what the scene is like in Detroit right now.
That was amazing. And you're talking about a Lions fan base where the Bears have the first pick and the 9th pick, and they don't pick till 29. Yet they showed up and showed out. They were really loud. And, so Wednesday was pretty dull and windy, overcast. And I was like, oh, man, this is going to be awful. And then somebody told me, hey, it's going to be sunny. And I said, that's all you need. It doesn't matter how cold it is. They're going to show up because this is a fan base. I said it on SportsCenter. This is a football town, regardless of what they've experienced with all the losses through the years. But over the last year, when you see how well the Lions have played, knocking on the door of the Super Bowl, and then you have Michigan winning the national championship, it's always been a football town. So I wasn't surprised. And then the crowd, when they got the trade with the Cowboys to move up, and they got their cornerback as well, it worked out really well, I think. And this place was pretty damn loud. And I love Detroit. I can relate to the entire city. It's very similar to how Philadelphians are.
Yeah, the Lions, I think, rocked it. Like, you get to one of the top cornerbacks at 24, so Lions fans should be pumped. It was funny. We were laughing. So I was on the news desk last night working the NFL draft, and Roger Goodell goes up at the beginning, and he always gets booed. They throw Eminem out there. They throw Calvin Johnson out there just to try to maybe hide the fact that Goodell doesn't get booed. They still stuck some boos in there when Goodell walked by himself. But I was funny to us that they kind of set it up so Goodell doesn't get booed. But Kevin, we're both Eagles guys. We're going to dive into some Eagles content in this episode, but we have to start with the number 8 overall pick. I know it's kind of a crazy place to start in an NFL draft. You want to talk to number 1, number 2, but no. The Atlanta Falcons steal the show. They draft Michael Penix Jr., Washington quarterback, at number 8 overall. I was going to kind of pass the ball to you, kind of get your instant reaction to this. It was the shocker of the draft. What do you make of the Atlanta Falcons kind of, quote unquote, reaching for their quarterback at number 8?
I think everybody was stunned, and it's not so much about Penix going 8. It's the Falcons using that pick, right? Like, I think the conversation and buzz was Penix wasn't getting past the Raiders at 13, so who was going to try to move up, or were the Raiders going to potentially move up to get Penix in front of a couple of other teams that needed quarterbacks? To me, the shocker, of course, no doubt, is you sign Kirk Cousins. He's on the hook for $100 million guaranteed over the next 2 years. Penix is 24. So the first real time where he could be penciled in, he's going to be 26 and already 2 years into a 5-year contract. And you have that window there when we see quarterbacks, especially, rookie deals where you got to kind of maximize it before you have to pay them, right? You have to maximize the rest of the roster. But, the day after, and you're trying to sort things out. Listen, next year's quarterback draft class is not projected to be that great. You're going to hear a lot of Shedeur Sanders. You're going to hear Quinn Ewers, but you're going to hear Carson Beck. But it's not going to be as great, I think, as this year, right? And the projections don't look that great 2 years from now. Now, things could change. No one had Jaden Daniels going number 2.
Joe Burrow, classic example, right? Burrow kind of comes out of nowhere. Same thing.
4 years ago, Spencer Rattler was the projected number 1 pick, right? So, I think a lot of things can change and we could be surprised. To me, just considering where the Falcons are now in win now mode, I understand getting a quarterback for the future plays a role here, especially Kirk Cousins being 36. But if you're in win now mode and you need defensive help, I'm still stunned, blown away by it. I think Cousins' agent made sure that they let everybody know last night that they were blown away by it. So to me, the Falcons could look really, really smart down the road, or this could blow up in their face. We'll see how this kind of plays out. They're in win now mode, and we all felt like they were a quarterback away, and now go figure they've got quarterback options, and they should have this quarterback position kind of solved over the next 5 years.
Yeah, so whenever it comes to like NFL draft recap or like talking about what teams do, it's really hard to kind of crush a player specifically, right? Like 4 to 10 first round picks hit, right? No one really has any idea who's gonna make it, who's not going. They're darts at the dartboard, right? They're tossing the dice. But you can critique process, right? You can critique how teams get to where they are and what decisions they made. And when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons process, it really doesn't make any sense. Like that's where I'm kind of at. Like you brought up the fact he's 24 years old.
Yeah.
When right now. So his birthday's in May, or he's 23 now. His birthday's in May. He'll be 24 in September. So when week 1 starts, he'll be 26 years old when Kirk Cousins guarantees end. And what the big thing that is kind of sitting in my mind right now is, how did we get here? Like, what happened from March till now, right? Because if they liked Michael Penix a lot in March 10th, for instance, 3 days before free agency, they're not signing Kirk Cousins to this deal, right? So something happened from after the Kirk Cousins signing took place to the draft. They didn't meet with Cousins, or they didn't meet with Penix, I believe, at his pro day. Then they sent a whole crew. I don't know if Arthur Blank was there, but the Fontenot was there. Raheem Morris was there, and they met with him for 45 minutes, apparently, and they fell in love with them. One of my biggest like critiques of general managers and teams is like, don't fall in love with guys. That's where you get burnt, right? Where you think my process is better. I know more than the other guy knows. This guy's it. We're going to take him. That's where you get in trouble. That's where teams always that's where the quote unquote busts happen. So that's what really kind of what freaks me out about this is, like, if you're a Falcons fan, you're going like, the process doesn't match what it did two months ago when we signed Kirk Cousins. And let me throw this at you. This is like a galaxy brain take, but you brought up that the quarterback class isn't as good next year. The Atlanta Falcons are under investigation right now for potential tampering with Kirk Cousins. They might get draft picks taken away. I'm thinking that they know that. And they know that they're going to get future picks taken away. They don't have ammo to go get a quarterback potentially, and that could be a reason why they took Penix here. That's just me, Galaxy, bringing this. I could be wrong, but that's a takeaway I had from this.
Theory. That's a really good conspiracy theory, Brenden, and it could pay off and make more sense down the road. I will say, and I'm glad you mentioned it, this is not about the player. This is about the draft value at 8, right? Because I played the scenario in my mind last night. Let's just say if the Falcons are picking in the 20s, would I be opposed to this pick? And I actually said, no, I wouldn't be opposed to this pick in the 20s. It was more of, hey, you can get the first defensive player off the board. You're picking at number 8. You're in win now mode, considering the contract you have specifically with Kirk Cousins. And you can win the division immediately. And so to me, just picking the value at this pick with Penix Jr., it's a luxury pick that you don't have the luxury to make right now if you want to compete in not just winning the division, but have a deep run in the postseason, which many believe the Falcons, when you look at their offense, all they needed was a quarterback to be armed to have a potential deep run.
And that's what they thought too, right? That's what the Falcons brass thought in March.
They said, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Raheem Morris said I wouldn't be here if we didn't have a quarterback that could have won games, right? Mm. So that's the most fascinating thing about this. When you need defensive help, and Raheem Morris is a defensive guy, but Penix is. I'll tell you what, Brenden, I talked to a handful of guys who said that if Penix didn't have the medical issues, he would be a top 5 pick. He'd probably be up there with all these guys because his arm's incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And can you protect the kid? And I think you could say that with anybody. Can you protect a quarterback? Because a quarterback can look great. I mean, shoot, it's in Detroit. Can you protect Jared Goff? Yeah, if you can, then you can have some success. So I'll be curious to see what the Falcons do the rest of the way. And then keep in mind how this plays out with Kirk Cousins, and if he's effective, how he handles it mentally. It is intriguing though, because we saw all the memes last night. Like Kirk Cousins came in as a 4th round pick with Washington when they picked RG3, and he was the one always looking over RG3's shoulder, right? ready for the opportunity, getting the opportunity eventually when RG3 got hurt. And now, we see it like over a decade later, the roles are reversed.
How the tables have turned on Kirk Cousins' quarterback career. You brought up like Penix the player, like he could be a top 5 pick. Like he's an awesome quarterback. Like he had 4,900 yards last year, 4,600 in 2022. And just the best case scenario for him is he's starting in 2 years, and then you paid Kirk Cousins. I think if they move off of Kirk Cousins next year, it would be 61 million guaranteed. You're paying for 1 season of a quarterback, which, like, if you're an owner, are you loving that? Like, that's not the way you want to do things. And I was looking up Kirk Cousins' contract last night, just like through over the cap, just like what would happen if they trade him. He has a very tradable. The 4-year one, I think 180 doesn't like tell justice of what the contract is. A lot of funny money going on there. So he can be traded next year, but he also has a no trade clause. So like he would have to kind of say where I want to go, but it's just fascinating to me. This pick was like just one of those where I grabbed myself like, what am I hearing?
Brenden, never in the history of the NFL. First off, we could say that when it comes to contracts with Kirk Cousins through the years, right? Never in the history of the NFL we've seen a bridge quarterback get $100 million guaranteed. Yes. That's the only way you can describe it, right?
Yeah.
NFL ever, and it always seems to happen when it comes to Kirk Cousins getting paid, no doubt, man. Like
it's a bridge. It's a bridge to a 24-year-old guy. Like he's older than Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson, Michael Penix right now. Like I still can't wrap my head around this. I've been dying since last night. I'm like, I cannot wait to talk to Kevin about this tomorrow because I need someone to kind of rant to. All right, Kevin, let's talk about our Birds, man. The Philadelphia Eagles take Quinyon Mitchell, number 22 overall. They get their pick at the first cornerback on the draft board. I saw so many tweets going like, can the NFL stop letting the Eagles like get these players falling to them? It just feels like every year the board falls Howie's way. Kevin, talk to me what your instant reaction was when the Eagles took Quinyon Mitchell.
To your point, how about Michael Parsons, who's like a media star, just losing his mind last night?
Oh, yeah. And he hated the Guyton pick, Kevin. Did you see? He was not happy with his own draft pick.
Cowboys are really smart. Like when they traded down, I was like, what? And then I was like, are they trying to get Barton? And Barton got off. And then there were a lot of projections with Guyton or Mims going to the Eagles at 22. So for them to get Guyton and then get the 73rd pick, a pretty good 3rd round pick tonight, I thought they did really well. And I'm sure Michael will appreciate that down the road when he's going up against Guyton in practice, because Guyton, a man. As for the Eagles, to be able to have your pick at cornerback and not move is so impressive, and it shows the patience. It also shows the draft board. Like you started this conversation, 14 offensive players off the board before we saw our first defensive player go to the Colts and Leatu. So, like, to me, it worked out really well for the Eagles because whether they were going to get Mitchell or not, they were going to have the choice of potentially Mitchell or Arnold when you look at the teams that had to fill need. Because I was thinking the only team that they were worried about was Jacksonville, and Jacksonville found a way to do whatever they did. And they got their guy later on in the draft when they traded with the Vikings, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, to me, like, Mitchell's phenomenal. Like, he slides into a space where he could still learn from Slay. You look at his size, 6 feet, 195 pounds, and he likes to tackle. He wants to tackle. He wants that 4.33 speed. With the 40, that played a role here because when you look at Arnold, I think that was 4.5 speed. Comes from Bama, Arnold, which I think any Bama cornerback that comes from Nick Saban is going to be a stud. But when you look at Mitchell, listen, Saban last night talked about it on the ABC broadcast. He wanted Mitchell to go into the portal so Bama could take. He was the number one target if he was going in the portal.
And who knows what happens if he's there, right? Does he start over a Kool-Aid or a Tyrion, right? Like, there's another world where I want to live in where that actually does happen, so I can kind of see how that would have played out.
Totally. And remember, like beginning of the season, Kool-Aid was the number one guy coming out Bama secondary. So Arnold emerging. So I found that whole conversation fascinating on how Nick set that up. And Nick's a phenomenal talent evaluator, especially when we talk about cornerbacks. That's his specialty. But to me, specifically, he wants the challenge. Mitchell's one of those guys that he's loyal. And I understand the competition is completely different from the MAC to the SEC, week in, week out, day in, day out in practice and stuff. But Mitchell's one of those guys that never backed down, that asked for the guys at the Senior Bowl, all the wide receivers. I want you. Let's go one-on-one. I like that. I like everything about that. And to me, this is the offseason of Howie going against the grain, right? First time they pick a cornerback in the first round since 2002. First time we've seen them spend a ton of money. A ton. I know everybody's going to DeMarco Murray. That was completely different. Ton of money at running back, right? So this is how he's saying, all right, I'm correcting some mistakes, some evaluations that we did differently. Maybe that means in the second round, they're going to go linebacker or something we don't often see with the Eagles in day one and day two, right? So I really like what they did. I love that they didn't have to give up a bunch. You still have pick 50 and 53. You could package them potentially if you want to move up to get a guy. I'm just really happy with what the board did for the Eagles, but what it also did shows you is that Howie nailed a bunch of things in the offseason so we can eliminate and target specific things that they need, and then the board falls their way and they can hit on those targets, right?
Yeah, so I want to talk about the process here, which will separate the player from the process to start. I love the fact that they didn't have to move up to get him. Like, that's one of my favorite parts of this. Like, I went into this thinking that they were going to trade up to get Tyrion Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell. That was kind of my pre-draft prediction. It was so hard this year to kind of get a read on what the Eagles were going to do, this position that they're in. But to get your pick of the number one corner and not move is a huge victory. And I'm really curious. I would love to see Howie Roseman in the Eagles draft board, because I was listening to Howie Roseman speak last night about the draft pick, and he said he was the number one player on our board that was available. So it's not like they sought out to get a cornerback and this was the guy. I'm assuming they probably want an offensive line at that position, right? Fontenot, maybe Fontenot had some injury red flags, but all the offensive linemen were gone by the time that they were there. And when I was like, I wanted to get the live reaction to the pick when I was at the work last night. I didn't want to look at my phone, so I kept thinking in my head, are they going to take Guyton? But Guyton would have been the 9th offensive lineman compared to the number one corner. Like, that's great process right there. And he said, like, we're not drafting for need, but this was a position of need, so that helped us as well make that pick. So I think the process is perfect. Like, you can't really like love Howie for this, but like, because the player fell to him, so like he did much. But you can say, look, he didn't make the snap to second decision to trade up because he had the right intel to know that this player was going to be there at 22, and that does deserve some credit, because some general managers panic, right, and move up, and they can't read what other teams are doing well. So that part of it is awesome for the Eagles.
Hey, since the Rager pick, Howie has made amends with everything he's done. Like, he has done a phenomenal job of evaluating, understanding the board, making sure that they fill needs before the draft. AJ Brown, right? And that opens the door where you can do other things, right? Like, so like, he's done a phenomenal job of understanding, okay, this didn't work. What do I need to do? Let's target SEC guys, right? Impact players immediately. Now, I complimented Howie all week long on what he has done the last 3 years. It now comes down to the players, specifically the Georgia players, right? Mm-hmm. The Jalen Carters, the Jordan Davises, the Nakobe Deans, the Keely Ringos, the Nolan Smiths. It comes down to some of these guys that where they nailed it from the perspective of value and scouting, right? Now it comes down to the players now meeting the moment on them drafting at that point and believing in them. And I think that you can't fault what Howie's been doing in the last 3 to 4 years.
For sure. Let's talk about the player a little bit, Quinyon Mitchell. So he is going to be 23 years old when when September rolls around. So that's the one, like, if you're going to critique this pick, you're looking at the profile. He played at MAC, right? So the profile is not great. Tyrion Arnold had definitely a better profile. He was younger, went to the SEC. Like, the background, not on-field stuff, Tyrion Arnold kind of screamed the pick. But when you look at the outside the intangibles, like the age, and he played at the MAC, like, he had 44 passes defended over the last 2 years at Toledo. So teams refused to go his way in some games. Like, they just said, we're not even going there. We're not throwing that way. He did play higher competition. Like, he played Ohio State, which he played really well in that game. He dominated Illinois last year, which was one of the better teams that he played. So he did get some Power 5 conferences during his time at Toledo. 4.3, 340-yard dash. He's an absolute bullet. He's got the length. He's got the size. and he's nasty. Like his all everything that you hear from the coaches and from outside people, that they love him. He's a competitor. He didn't want to leave Toledo, right? Like you brought up the fact that Saban wanted him. He wanted to stay and said, screw the NIL money, screw all that. I'm going to stay loyal here. You love to see that. Do you see him partying with Eagles fans in Detroit after? That was awesome.
Yeah, somebody hit me up and said, and you talk about a little bit of the competitiveness. Somebody hit me up and said he doesn't look happy that he got drafted by the Eagles. I said, it's not the Eagles. He's ticked off that he had to wait till 22.
He wants some money. He wants money, Kevin. Yeah, right? Like if you're seeing millions of dollars go out your bank account, you're not going to be too happy no matter where you go.
Go 12 to between 12 to 18, and then you go 22. It doesn't matter. You're just in a bad mood. And then he turned the corner when he was with Eagles fans. And here's a couple other things. Like, did not allow a touchdown in 402 coverage snaps in 2023. Didn't allow a touchdown. He's not handsy too, because you look at the penalty numbers, there are none.
2 penalties. No, 1 penalty in the last 2 years, 0 last year.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. And that plays a huge role here. And again, so they got Isaiah Rodgers, who I had to deal with a gambling issue for last year when he was with the Colts. He's going to come in. They have depth there in the secondary. I think it's the end of James Bradbury. I think no Eagle fan will shed a tear, especially after what we saw and witnessed last year. And then, Darius is young. I mean, young. He's the opposite of young. He's getting older and older now, right? So you have the idea of Darius teaching Quinyon. You have a young secondary. We saw a lot of Ricks and, Keeley, trying to figure things out. And Job, maybe they're going to get better. When you look at Ricks and Job, those guys were, and Ringo, those were high star guys in high school, and they went to major programs in the SEC. Maybe they develop, especially under Fangio, differently. So I think that one thing that this team has, hopefully Mattis can stay healthy. That's been the biggest concern through it all. The one thing that they have is depth. And as we saw and experienced last year, and probably the last 2 to 3 years, they were just throwing out guys that they were picking up on the street, a week later, because they had literally no depth. And guys,
on a Sunday night game against the Cowboys, Keely Ringo's getting his first playing action. So that kind of stuff. Yeah, you're not rushing a Ricks, you're not rushing a Ringo, you're not rushing an Isaiah Rodgers. Now you have just more flexibility what you want to do. I actually don't think James Bradbury is going to be on the roster now. I know the contract stuff is hard to get by. He has a $20 million captain in 2026. It's not it's one of the bigger mistakes Howie's made over the last couple of years, but I do think that they're going to somehow find a way to get him off the roster. It's a perfect fit with Fangio's defense. He played a ton of off-ball coverage at Toledo. And then if you're going to critique Quinyon Mitchell's on-field play at Toledo, he didn't play a ton of press man coverage. I think he had 30 press man snaps last year. But he went to the Senior Bowl, like you brought up earlier in this conversation, and dominated Ricky Pearsall, dominated Roman Wilson in press coverage. There's so many reps there. So it was just Toledo didn't ask him to do that, but he has all the tools to kind of make it work. I'm going to throw some fun Quinyon Mitchell nuggets your way that I dug up last night. So at practice, he clocked in a 23.58 miles per hour at one point that the coaches tested him. He was the only FBS player since 2000 with 4 interceptions and 2 pick sixes in one game. He did not commit a penalty in 2023, like you mentioned. 40 straight starts at Toledo. That's great experience. Like, Tyrion Arnold doesn't have that experience. They're going to be compared a lot over the next 10 years, Tyrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell, right? Not kind of similar to the Rager Jefferson, but I think it's a different scenario. But they're going to be compared whether they like it or not. And he can squat 555 pounds, Kevin. So that's how he picks. You got to get him in the building.
Jalen's got a partner in the locker room.
Exactly.
And the weight room, too.
Yeah. One of the funniest parts of draft night, Kevin, is the Eagles snuck in making AJ Brown the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL, and no one's talking about it. Howie Roseman's a menace, man.
He is. And I got tipped off before that was going to happen, and I was like, and I came back to one thing too, getting that deal done again before Jamar, before CeeDee Lamb, before Justin Jefferson, like to get Devontae Smith and AJ Brown done before these 3 guys set the bar, and that's going to be set by Justin Jefferson is a tip of the cap here for figuring things out, and he finds a way, man. He finds a way.
Yeah. Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson are now all locked in through 2026. They will be here. So the Eagles, like the core is there, like it's all kind of sitting there, and they just got to put it together. Still, like I'm still kind of in like I'll see it and then I'll start getting pumped because the way the season ended last year.
Yeah,
But like if you're an Eagles fan, you got to be excited from where you are just from what's gone on this offseason. Okay, Kevin, let's talk a couple more things before we finish off. What was your favorite pick that we haven't talked about already in the first round?
So I really like Jaden Daniels. I really like Drake May. I mean, Caleb Williams, number one. It's a logical thing. I think Jaden Daniels, talking to my sons about him, like, oh, mullet boy, we're gonna have to face this guy in the division. We met Drake last year. We had a blast with Drake May. I just hope the Patriots put him in a good situation. It's going to be tough. Let's hope Jacoby Brissett plays the whole year before Drake May is thrown to the wolves because they just don't have receivers. But when you look at, fit and you look at, oh my gosh, this makes perfect sense. It's the Chiefs. Like to get Xavier Worthy, who's Deshaun Jackson 2.0. He's the same size-wise as Deshaun. He has the same speed, but he also is a phenomenal route runner. And, that speed, he literally the fastest wide receiver or the fastest human and fastest wide receiver in combine history is a 4.21. And then you throw him in with Patrick Mahomes and Andy's system. Like, it's just the perfect fit. And it's just like, of course the Chiefs did that. Of course the Chiefs can do this. Right?
To use the Buffalo Bills as a trampoline to get there. The guy that the team that they just keep beating in the playoffs, like that entertained me. Yeah, it's funny. They're in a spot where they can just do whatever the fuck they want because they have Patrick Mahomes. Like it's like we'll just do this cool little thing at the end of the first round and take this kind of I guess this luxury pick because we have the best player on the planet. We don't care.
And it's Cheetah 2.0. He's just going to go down the field and stretch the field. Like I think it's a phenomenal pick for Andy and this offense. And to me, it's my favorite pick. Like, of course, the Chiefs.
You brought up that the Eagles have to play Jaden Daniels twice a year. Malik Neighbors to the Giants is my favorite pick, Kevin. I think the Giants did exactly what they should have done. And I love how they didn't go reach for a quarterback. It would have been the fourth quarterback in the draft. They didn't go above and beyond to kind of fix that position. Daniel Jones is a big winner here as well. His starting job is set. But I think Malik Neighbors is just a different player. I've been on the Malik Neighbors bandwagon for the last 2 months. I personally thought he was the best player outside of Caleb Williams in this draft. I know it's crazy, but to get him in that building, to get the New York Giants finally wide receiver. Kevin, they haven't had a 1,000-yard wide receiver since Odell Beckham Jr. in 2018. They haven't had a 900-yard wide receiver during that run. Like it's been a mess at that position. So for New York to finally hammer that down, for a guy that I think is a phenomenal player and going to be a superstar, I think the Giants had one of the best drafts.
I'm 100% with you on that. Like they get the right pick there, and Neighbors. I mean, Neighbors is. Can you say a steal at 6? Yeah, because he's that good. In any other year, I think he's the number one wide receiver off the board. If you don't have Marvin Harrison Jr., the issue will be with Malik Neighbors, as it was with Odell Beckham Jr., who's throwing him the football, right? And the Giants have not figured out that puzzle. And I think that the Giants would have done everything they could to get Drake May. I think the Vikings would have done a heck of a lot to get Drake May. So to me, I love when the Eagles picked Mitchell, it was like one of those, okay, we're going to have somebody down the road in the future because we got to still deal with McLaurin, CeeDee Lamb, Jahan Dotson, and now Malik Neighbors, right?
Great call.
What are your division guys doing to make sure you can counter? And now you got a guy that you feel like could be a shutdown corner over the next 5 to 8 years while you face these guys over the next 5 to 8 years.
So, Kevin, I could do this all day, but we got to get out of here. Thanks so much for doing this, man. Appreciate you. Great talking with you. Why don't you let the listeners know where they can follow you? Anything you got coming up? Anything you want to plug in?
Brenden, my pleasure, man. It's always a heck of a lot of fun. Kevin Negandhi, at Kevin Negandhi on Twitter, and as well as Instagram, and I'll be on SportsCenter tonight, live from Detroit. Can't wait.
Kevin, enjoy day 2, enjoy day 3, enjoy Detroit. Hope you have a good weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.